From Lytton Village in the beautiful county of Derbyshire, I'm on a mission to explore the nearby village of Eyam. It has an incredible history, but first I'm stopping briefly by Peter's Stone, formerly known as Gibbet Rock, which has a gruesome history too. It's where, in the mid-19th century, the last criminal to be gibbeted in a metal cage was left to rot. 11 years later, the contraption and skeleton were removed because of folk passing complained about the rattling of its bones on the iron cage. Creepy, eh? Oh, and latterly, the rock became known as Peter's Stone, as its dome top resembled the Basilica in Rome. This is the northern end of Cressbrook Dale. So now I'm driving up to Bretton for some great views across the Dales and Peak District. Nice pub there too. As I pan across the landscape, I would imagine little has changed over the centuries. Much of the Dales have been farmed and mined, mining for gritstone and house building, and lead mining too. But in every direction there's picture postcard views. Arriving in Eyam, there's a large car park across the road from the museum. Now, if you're interested in Eyam's history, this is the place to be. It usually opens at 10 a.m, but is closed on a Monday, so check times before you go. Yes, had to be done. Once inside, there's a wealth of information and graphics here. So this is just some of the info displays. And here's the culprit. A plague doctor, which if you were a child, would certainly scare you to death. John Daniel's medical chart reads buboes around neck, delirious muttering and constipation. Diagnosis, not long for this world. Plan, don't bother. Oh dear. It's quite sobering to see just how many households were affected. And indeed, how many villagers died. The plague came to Eyam in the latter summer of 1655 and ended in November 1666, over a period of some 14 months. One of the most harrowing and tragic stories is of Elizabeth Hancock, who buried her husband and 6 children over a period of just 8 days. Absolutely devastating for her. So yes, the museum is the place to start, and don't forget to pick up a map to the village and where to find its most notable places. Plus, there are map boards displayed in the car park too. Well, that museum was fantastic and well worth a visit. The village appears to have changed little, as it does maintain its historic character, but of course there are the obvious modernities. What's fine grinding, you may ask? Well, it refers to the processing of industrial minerals and aggregates. Yes, I did wonder. The Jacobean Eyam Hall was built in 1672 as a wedding present for John Wright. Ironically, it still hosts weddings today. Next door there's a craft centre, cafe and restaurant. Yep, I think we'll do this on the way back. So now, I'm going to go down the street in Eyam and look at some of the plague houses that are information boards outside, which quite fascinating to read. So I'm approaching the plague cottages. These date from the mid-17th century. With all the trauma that happened here, you may wonder, are they haunted at all? Well yes, some are reported to be haunted. Rose Cottage. It's where the whole family who lived here perished within a few months. How tragic. As most of these cottages are occupied, they must be well used to tourists pointing their cameras into their gardens. Plague Cottage. This is where the bubonic plague first came to Eyam. George Vickers, a tailor, opened a bundle of cloth sent up from London where the plague was rife and unknowingly warmed the damp cloth by the fire. This released infected fleas caught from rats. Thus he became the first victim of the Black Death. Poor Mary. She was obviously immune to the pestilence, as a few others were too. But how she and other families dealt with such grief, God only knows. Directly opposite, across the road from Plague Cottage, was the home of Emmett Siddle and family, and we'll hear more about her later. Like Mary, Jane survived, but lost 25 relatives. How on earth do you deal with such loss? The Miners' Arms Croft, during the plague, was used as an exchange for food, clothing, and for money in return, without, of course, direct contact. The Miners' Pub, by the way, is haunted apparently. Well, that comes as no surprise. All I gotta do is keep ahead of the school kids. I'm in the village centre, and I'm searching for the Lydgate graves. Actually, I asked a lady and she corrected me by saying, "Lidgett? Yeah, I think that's the one." She could tell I wasn't a local. Well, here's the cottage, and sadly, here are the graves of a father and daughter. I stop for cake and coffee, and then I continue on my, I suppose, slightly morbid quest to find more plaques of the terrible family death tolls. The church bells toll, and that reminds me to head to St. Lawrence's Church. St. Lawrence's Church dates from the 13th century, and it's where, in 1664, the new rector, William Mompesson, took over from Thomas Stanley, the previous vicar. The church has a late Saxon or early Norman font. The stained glass window was designed by Alfred Fisher and installed in 1985. The beautiful stained glass window tells a visual story of the plague, its victims and survivors. The rector, William Mompesson, and the tailor draw in his last breath. A betrothed couple unable to hug each other, and Mompesson, with his wife and Thomas Stanley, planning to convince the villagers to self-isolate. Sounds familiar, eh? And it was quarantine that eventually saved hundreds, if not thousands of lives beyond the village. On the last Sunday in August, red roses are placed on Catherine's tomb. This is the only house in Eyam built in brick. Now I'm off to find Mompessons Well. It's an uphill walk with great views down to Eyam village and beyond. For some reason this clip of the chickens was the only video I took until I reached the well, and that was down to the road having no path, so I hurried up quickly. And, believe it or not, this is the sign to Mompessons Well that could do with a bit of a clean-up. Fortunately, the display panel gives lots of local information. It's not actually a well, but a covered stream, probably used by pack horses back in the day. Mompessons Well, right behind me, and it's here the villagers left money for food that was brought to them. The money was soaked in vinegar, hoping that would kill the bugs. But suffice to say, it worked, and after 18 months, the plague subsided, thank God. But Mompesson, he was a genius, he really was. And sadly, his wife died of the plague as well, but he survived. But the villagers were lucky to have him, that's for sure. Oh well, I head back down to the village to find the herbalist, Humphrey Merrill's grave. Humphrey was buried behind his house, in a field, and quite tricky to find. I missed a turning and ended up outside the village. Back on track, I have sheep for company. Now, could that be Meryl's grave? Well, this has got to be it. Looks to be an engraving there. Well, that's quite away from the house. The story goes that Andrew Meryl, a relation, avoided the plague by going to live on the edge of Eyam Moor with his pet cockerel. He built a hut and lived there until the plague was over. It begs the question, what did he eat and how did he survive? And what about the cockerel? Walking back down into the village, I come across these water troughs. There are several in the village. Well, I wouldn't fancy a drink from these. So this was the former home of Richard Furness, a multi-talented man and poet. Let's look at some other aspects of the village, like the old shoe factory, which was big business in the 19th century. Of course, Eyam has the village stocks, principally from miscreant lead miners, probably after being thrown out of the Miners' Arms. So now I'm on the trail to locate the Riley graves, which turns out to be a lot easier, particularly as you start off in Riley Lane. But I spot a group of school children once again ahead of me. Oh no. Right, we're off to find the Riley graves. Some school kids. I was going to go to the Boundary stone first, but unfortunately there's a big school party heading that way, and unfortunately too, right in front of me, another bunch of school kids, obviously going to the Riley graves. Oh well. The Riley graves are named after the farm where the Hancock family lived. I can get my photography done first. Fortunately, I have 5 minutes to get across to the Riley graves. Not their original place, as some were moved in the 19th century. Gathered together, and today, as you can see, they're within a teardrop-shaped stone wall maintained by the National Trust. The Riley family, they shared the land with the Talbot family, who unfortunately perished first. It wasn't long before the Hancocks became infected, and one by one succumbed to the disease. Over the course of just 8 days, Elizabeth Hancock lost her 6 children and husband. She had to act as sexton, and one by one dragged their bodies out of the house and buried them. It's beyond imagination how she coped with that. Shortly after, she fled and went to live with her only other child in Sheffield. Yeah, this is quite poignant. The whole household was wiped out, one by one. In the middle lies the father, surrounded by his 6 children. In the 19th century, a descendant of Elizabeth Hancock regrouped the graves together into this stone enclosure. This inscription reads, John Hancock Sr., buried August the 7th, 1666. Remember man, as thou goest by, as thou art now, even once was I. As I do now, so must thou lie. Remember man, that thou must die. Very peaceful here. As of course if you haven't got a tribe of school children here. Well, that worked out a treat. Yeah. As they got to the top of the hill and bunched together and stopped for a moment or two, I was able to pass and zoom on and get my shots around the Riley graves. So that was so nice of them, or nice of the teachers to hold back for a couple of minutes. Brilliant. Yeah, so I'm off to the Boundary stone now, which is sort of that way. So it's back down the hill into the village square, and I think it's the first left. Actually, it's up past the Lidget, what I think it's called. But I love this place. It really is absolutely fascinating history. Sad history, of course, in the 17th century, but yeah, how the bubonic plague came to Eyam in 1666. Of course, it was ravishing London at the time, About 100,000 died by the time that was over. And around 250, 300 died here of a population of around 700, I believe. Although the figures are a bit variable. So we make our way back down to the village square. Next is a hike out to the Boundary Stone. You can drive and park by Lover's Leap, just outside Stony Middleton, and try and find the path across the road up the steep footpath to the fields above. So here we are again at Lidget Lane, and if I remember, there's a left turn into a gravel path which goes most of the way over and around rocky stiles. Yeah, it's a bit tricky to get through there, especially with a backpack on, so go around this way. You know, with these places you always want it to yourself. There's a couple following me. It's a lovely walk. I don't think it's too far now. Yet another narrow gate to get through. How am I supposed to get through there? This has got to be perhaps a former boundary stone with drilled holes by the stile. Wow, there's quite a ridge over there. And I think it's not far now. Wow. Oh, I'm loving this. I mean, the weather is perfect. Absolutely perfect. And it's clear. And behind me, I think I can spot it. So I hurry to get some shots in the can, whilst avoiding sheep poo in the process. And here it is, the boundary stone. So this is where coins were placed in the holes and provisions gratefully collected from the parishioners of Stony Middleton, roughly half a mile away. And there we are, the village of Stony Middleton. So, once again, coins would have been placed in the holes and soaked in vinegar to purify them. Remember the tableau of Emmet and Roland? Well, it's likely that the betrothed couple would have met here, as Roland was from nearby Stony Middleton, but of course leaving space between each other. A more probable location would have been down at Cucklet Delf, as Bagshaw House, where Emmet lived, was just beyond her garden, with Jumper Brook being their boundary line. By April 1666, Emmet stopped coming, and Roland only learnt about her death in the autumn when the plague was over. How sad. We'll revisit this location shortly. Whilst on the not so joyful subject of tragedies, in 1762 Hannah Badley, jilted by her lover, jumped off the cliff tops above Stony Middleton. As fate would have it, she was saved by a petticoat, which, on the way down, acted as a parachute and became caught up in brambles, which saved her life. Sadly though, she died 2 years later, still unmarried. Where it happened was once a pub, now an Indian restaurant, in Stony Middleton. So many tragic stories, but I guess the one courageous act was for the villagers, persuaded by the vicars, William Mompesson and Thomas Stanley, was to stay, in what was a brave decision to make, as we now know, lockdown. Staying in their homes, praying for survival, and as stoic, God-fearing people. Thank goodness many survived. It's estimated that around 700 people lived in Eyam in the 17th century, and in 2001 the census recorded 926 folk living there. And as I mentioned earlier, the population hasn't changed that much. Yeah, such a tragedy. I put the boundary stone way back then. Now, next on the agenda, and probably my final venture here, is to go and find Cucklet Delf, now known as Cucklet Church. It's a relatively short walk to Cucklet Church, But before I go, the cafeteria next to Eyam Hall calls for a much needed coffee and cake. Leaving the courtyard, turn left and cross the road. You can cut through Eyam Hall's car park, or head down New Close and turn left into Dunlow Lane. There's a van blocking my way, so I turn back and cut through the car park. I was in Eyam a few days ago, but ran out of time to visit some of the notable outlying sites. So here I am again, 3 days later. After about 70 metres, follow the grassy path on the left. There will be a sign too. If you wonder why I seem to be out of breath, it's because I'm jogging between takes. I'm a man on a mission. Once again, I'm on my way to Cucklet Church, Delf, as it's known. So, we just follow this track down here. It is signposted a little further on, but it's a wonderful morning. The crows are crowing. Bloody things. Noisy buggers. There's the chicken coops on your right. Past these. We take a left here at the 5-bar gate. Yeah. And over the stile. A magnificent tree here. Wow. And here's the post, showing the way to Cucklet Church. And when you see this huge mound on your left, it's beneath there. Wow. There's more than one entrance, well, two in fact. This is the first one. Thank goodness it's a dry day. Wow. But rather than going that way, I'm going to go around this way. It's a very steep embankment here. But up on the hillside here apparently is where people from the village sat apart, obviously, and listened to the preaching of the curate, William Mompesson. Cucklet Church is a natural limestone cavern with several arches, entrances and exits. Look at that. It's amazing. It's fascinating to explore. However, if it's wet, then take care, as the rocks inside are very slippery. Yeah, quite incredible. Quite incredible. And there's all sorts of nooks and crannies here. Fantastic. Well, I guess the congregation would have had a clearer view of the cave from the hillside here than they have now, 350 odd years later. Yeah, but they've been sat around here because it's too dangerous to be in the church, the actual church in the village, of course, as they had to separate. Reminds you of the bad times in COVID, but here, much worse in many ways. And I would imagine from every Sunday service given, there'd have been one or two less, perhaps more, of the villagers. In the valley below is the stream known as Jumber Brook, and I guess back in the day this would have been like a boundary line where Emmett and Roland would have met in secret all those years ago. On the last Sunday in August, the vicar and parishioners of Eyam walked down to the Cucklet Church and a service is held just like it would have been 360 years ago. So, Eyam, what a fascinating place to explore and learn about. Thanks for watching, folks. Cheers.